Welcome to another Sunday morning edition of the Adult Sunday School class here at South Hill. I'm John McMath. We've been studying our way slowly and with no apparent effect through Joshua and hypothetically Judges. I've got this week and next week, and then it's Bill's turn to give us his absolute best shot at, what's it, 2 Peter and Jude? Is that it, Bill? You had him for 2 Peter and Jude?
In July 6th.
2 Peter.
Oh, wait a minute. What?
He's asking you. 2 Peter.
Yes, 2 Peter and Jude. Yes. Sorry, John, I don't hear that well.
That's all right, yeah, that's all right.
About a good one.
I have ancient and strong opinions, especially about Jude. I had to diagram that book once in seminary, in Greek, of course. The thing is like one long sentence with nothing but participles. It was in Jude that I learned to absolutely abhor participles. I will never use them for anything. That's it. Oh, such a book. I have to say, I'm glad it's you and not me. That'll be fun. I'm assuming with your usual timing that we'll spend 20 years getting through. Okay. Anyway, I've got a couple of weeks to show you several more out of a collection of 5,000 slides from a moving tour bus. And this is back in Jericho. We're going to finish up Jericho in the next little bit. I've just got a few more pictures to show them. We're going to be moving on through the rest of Joshua's campaign, and we'll kind of wrap that up. I don't know if we'll get very far into Judges by next week, but I will have introduced it, I think, by then. You'll see why that works out as we go on. Let's pray, and we'll launch in. Father, thank you for our time. We give ourselves to you. As Jericho was given to the Lord, so we give ourselves to you. We submit ourselves in worship. We would be your people and allow you to be our God, acknowledge you, make your character and attributes known in the world. Help us, Father, to understand your word now, for we pray in Christ's name, amen. Okay, so one of the things that gets everybody all upset is that the city of Jericho was utterly devoted to the Lord. That's an English translation that doesn't do a very good job of handling the Hebrew word haram, H-R-M, sort of, which means a sacrifice that is utterly destroyed. We see a similar term for the whole burnt offering. So in a sense, the city of Jericho was entirely given to the Lord so that there would be nothing left over. That was the intention. Nothing left. There would be no looting and pillaging of the city of Jericho. So the people, the animals, all the stuff in the city was to be devoted, with some small exceptions for the treasury of the Lord, but that was all there was supposed to be. That's what that term means. So what we would expect from Jericho, based on the historical record of it, when we come today to the mound of Jericho, if it were untouched at this point, we would expect just a bare mound with nothing but ruins. People who go into archaeology thinking that they're going to be brushing a little dust away from gigantic marble monuments haven't been to Jericho. it looks like an excavation site. Okay, just bare, nothing much to see. It's just a icky place. And that's deliberate, that's what God intended. Okay, we're going to move on from there. This particular spot we talked about last week, that's in the wall. The original wall would have been up above that glacis. The red bricky streak, which is kind of now a white chalky looking line, is the bricks of the Middle Bronze Age wall that came down. You know, thump, 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 and they just, over the next roughly 600 years of abandonment of the city, that material broke down, rolled downhill, was carried by erosion out into the surrounding fields, and that's what we see today. It's still there. Okay, let's go on to the next one. In 619, we're told that all of the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They're to go in the treasury. In the ancient world, metals were permanent forms of wealth. If you're going to store wealth, that wasn't, certificates of deposit in the bank. If you had any excess wealth of any sort, say you had more grain this year than you needed to survive, and you sold a little bit for a few pieces of bronze or silver, eventually you'd collect that and sooner or later melt it down to make some object. In the ancient world, that was normally some kind of a cult object, an idol. Okay, and so what we see here on the left is, I don't even know which kinds of metals these are. Mostly this is going to be bronze. Sometimes we find gold, but most of this is bronze. And these are all Canaanite objects on the left. They're things that are made to be worn. And it would be a big dress-up occasion when you'd wear a thing like this, but it was still, there it was. The one on the far left is Baal. And don't ask me how I can tell, but I can. The other two are Asherah. And you can tell that this is Asherah because of the exaggerated sexual component. And I'm not going to explain that. Ladies, ask your mom. The things on the right, the bowls are, the one in the back is silver, the one in the front is gold. And again, that's substantial wealth right there. That's something that somebody had worked on a whole lifetime, and now it sits in a museum. These are the things that they kept. The majority of the metal objects that we find in the ancient tells are either idols of some kind or some kind of weapon. Almost always is one or the other, except when we occasionally, this is really rare, find something like a goblet or a bowl made of metal. Okay, so a little bit of that, a little bit of this. Collapse of the wall, Kenyan streaks. We talked about that last time. This little bit of wall that you see, I'm going to see if I can get that off of there, that you can see here is interesting. That's part of City 4. That's the Middle Bronze Wall that Garstang identified as the wall of Jericho. Kenyon, of course, decided that it couldn't possibly be because there was no Jericho in those days, and Joshua didn't exist, and Moses couldn't, all of that. But that's the wall, and we see just bits of it. The excavation has gone down a ways. We go all the way down to the foundations of this wall. It goes all the way to the early Bronze Age. The Middle Bronze Age wall was built on the top of the early Bronze Age wall, the ruins of it, and the late Bronze continued to use the Middle Bronze Age line. The city itself went on into the suburbs, the low area around the outside of the city. But anyway, that's that one. Let's see if I can do that one. Okay. The burning of Jericho. This is in verse 24 and beyond. They burned the city with fire, all that was in it. Only the silver and gold and articles of bronze did they hang on to. And Rahab came out along with all of her people. This photograph is actually taken from Hatzor, the museum in Hatzor. There were a lot of cities that Joshua conquered and took. He defeated the kings and the armies of a whole bunch of cities. And we're going to see that list in the later part, chapter 12, I believe, is where we find the list. There you get this long list of kings and the cities and whatnot. That chapter doesn't tell us, neither does the rest of the book tell us, that Joshua destroyed all of those cities. In fact, the Bible is quite explicit that Jericho, Ai, and Hatzor were burned. The others were not burnt. They were left standing on their tells. A tell is the mound that a city is built on, the layer cake of all of the eras that the city has been in existence. The primary argument for the so-called late date for the Exodus, Albright's argument. William Albright is a scholar to whom we must always listen. If you've got books in your library by William Albright, treasure them and read them. He's almost always right. But on this issue, he is really wrong. I remember having a conversation with an archaeologist at Lachish, David Usishkin, teaches in Tel Aviv, and was doing the excavation at Lachish. And I remember him saying, I remember as a child studying the Bible that Joshua destroyed and burned all the cities of Israel. Now, David Usishkin is a really brilliant guy, and I really like him a whole lot, but he grew up in the Albright tradition, and he held to a late date for the Exodus. You know, one of the hallmarks of that is the belief that all of the cities that you see destroyed in Israel were destroyed by the Israelites at the time of the conquest. That's not true. The intention of God from the beginning, when he said you're going to live in cities that you did not build. You're going to eat from the fruit of fields that you did not plant and trees that you did not cultivate. They were not going to destroy the place, let alone destroy all of the cities. And so the last thing we should look for, if we're looking for an archaeological layer where we're going to find the conquest, the last thing we should be looking for is widespread burns, because it didn't happen. The Bible is clear about that. And so when we go out looking at this era, if we look around 1400 BC, what we find is 3 cities that were burned. Now, I don't want to take you way into the weeds well, yes I do, but I'm not going to. Jericho and Hatzor are clear and obvious. We know exactly where those places are. There aren't any other places, anything like those places, anywhere near those places, and they've got to be the place. But Ai is a problem. I think we'll get there a little bit this morning. I is just a bit of a problem. Some of us are convinced that we've found the place, but that's not a majority opinion. It certainly isn't the long-held consensus of a place called Et Tel, the tell or the ruin. It can't be there. And we also haven't found Bethel. Some people say Bethel, but it's Bethel, house of God. Bethel and Ai are twin cities. Bethel is the big one, and Ai will be an outpost toward the east. And we haven't found Bethel. Albright thought it was Bytine, and he excavated there and found all kinds of really, really good stuff, with the exception of the altar that Jeroboam built. Jeroboam built temples, altars, to whatever, the golden calves in Bethel and Dan. And we found the altar and the temple area in Dan. And it's huge. It's stone. It's built for the centuries. It's one of these grand monuments that archaeologists always hope of finding. The temple at Bethel must have been larger and even more impressive because it was right there. And yet at Bytine, there is no temple complex. Why is that, do you think? When we look at the levels for Bytine and compare those with the levels for Bethel in the Bible, we find, here's a spot and there's a spot here. And it doesn't match up. The levels are wrong. Same is true with Et Tel and Ai. The levels are all wrong. Et Tel just doesn't fit. So we've been looking for a new location. The most likely location for Bethel is actually in Ramallah. The correct location is actually they call it the governor's mansion, but it was the palace where Yasser Arafat lived, the government compound in Ramallah. There is precisely zero likelihood of archaeologists getting there. I mean, it's not going to happen until the millennium. There's no way. I, on the other hand, is a whole lot more difficult anyway. But, so we can't say for sure that I was burned, but it most likely was. The place we suspect probably was burned. Anyway, why am I showing you this? Why was it only Jericho, Hatzor, and probably Ai that were burned? And people scratch their heads and they say, well, because Joshua ran out of matches? And the key is in this little thing on the right, the object on the left. We call that the praying hands. You got two hands up, okay? And then at the top you see a crescent moon. That's at Hatzor. That's in one of the temples in the suburbs of Hatzor. The name Jericho is from Yareach, which means the moon. So Jericho is the moon city, and Hatzor has a major temple site dedicated to the worship of the moon. We know from Mesopotamian architecture that moon worship was really, really, really bad stuff. It was really disgusting on a level that, frankly, I'm not even going to hint at, because I see that we have in our audience some people under 60. And, you're not allowed to know these things. Okay, and don't even ask. But they were really bad. And it's as though God is saying, this part of Israel is not going to be looted. You're not going to take these things or live in these places. This has to be cauterized. This is an infection. This is a very bad thing, and it has to be cauterized, utterly destroyed. Any rate, that's what I want to show you there. Another side point, just for the sake of general knowledge, the symbol of Islam is the crescent moon. Now, what's the connection? I can't demonstrate one. Is it possible that Allah is originally the moon god? Yeah, that's a possibility. But I can't find the linguistic connection. But it's probably there someplace. I find this fascinating. Okay, that's all that for that. And then at the end of this chapter, we're told that Jericho was cursed. The curse goes like this. So Joshua made them take an oath at this time. This is verse 26 of chapter 6. Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and builds the city of Jericho with the loss of his firstborn. He shall lay its foundation. With the loss of his youngest son, he shall set up its gates. So, foundations and gates and all of that kind of stuff. This, by the way, is a view of Jericho from upstream a ways. Doesn't make a lot of difference. But the city was cursed. Joshua put a curse on this thing. The city was not rebuilt until the evil days of King Ahab, 8th century BC, the 700s. Under King Ahab, all kinds of things happened that were evil. The worship of Baal proliferated, and the city of Jericho, and probably its moon worship, were rebuilt. The work was done by a man named Hiel of Bethel. And he went down and rebuilt the city of Jericho, losing his firstborn and his eldest in the process. And we're told that in 2 Kings. First Kings. It's Ahab. Yeah, First Kings around 16 or 17. Have you got that verse down there?
Yeah, 1634.
16? Good for you.
I wrote my Bible from a previous message.
Some other message that I gave, huh? Yeah. Well, I might have been wrong. Yeah. Anyway, that's interesting because that level, that 1400 BC level, the late bronze 1-2 horizon, is marked by this erosion. It's a rubble field. And what was rebuilt on top didn't amount to much of anything. There is a layer that goes over the top, but it's a very small imitation of what had been. Go, Frank.
Is it okay to ask a New Testament question about Jericho here, or is that?
Is it okay to ask a new question? Okay, I answer questions about the New Testament, but I can't guarantee their correctness. So if you're willing to take that risk.
I'm willing to take it. So the story of Bartimaeus, Jesus, so this is a synoptic problem. In Mark, it's when he's leaving Jericho that he heals Bartimaeus. And if you assume these are the same accounts, Luke says it's as he's coming in. And I've heard one of the answers to that is that Jericho was in two different units in the New Testament. I don't know how true that is, so I just thought, we have an archaeology guy that's talking about layers. Maybe you could let me know if there's any evidence for that.
Yeah, New Testament archaeology I've always found kind of boring. Because it's right up on the surface and it's this very short time, and so there's no challenge. With Jericho, what we see going on is that, yes, there was certainly a city there. It was hard to call it a city, maybe the size of Rathgrum, okay? So, you know, if you slow down a little bit to obey the speed limit, you'll notice that you're going through it, okay? And Jericho is about the same. Modern town of Jericho just takes 5 minutes to drive through in a tour bus. It's not a big place. The New Testament era, it was spread out a bit. There were no walls, of course, in New Testament times. And so the city was spread into several areas. There's the Old Testament area, which was the Tell, which would have been like the, that's the old part of town, and maybe some people lived around there, but mostly they didn't. They spread out around the spring, or farther to the east toward the Dead Sea. There's a large compound that Herod built. Up the Wadi Kelt towards Jerusalem, there's a long, skinny section that is also called Jericho, New Testament Jericho, that was built prior to the time of Christ. So that doesn't help. Okay, the New Testament is normally not clear about the boundaries of Jericho. And I don't blame the New Testament writers, because Jericho was kind of a spread out thing. And how could you tell when you're getting into Jericho? Well, do you mean Old Testament Jericho, Herodian Jericho, Wadi Kelt Jericho? Which Jericho are we talking about? It's like Spokane Valley and Spokane. You know, there's a boundary, but Kevin, I'm not sure I can find it in my, without Google Maps. Okay, so yeah, that's a good question, and I wish that the Old Testament archaeology provided a good answer to that, but it doesn't. It is in fact a synoptic problem, and those things happen. I'm going to kill this and go get another. See if I can find another. Oops, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Open it up on my pen. Ooh. See if I can find it. This is supposed to be easier. Okay, there we go. And Joshua. Okay. 7 through 10 is from Ai to the Southern Campaign, and this is a look at the Jezreel Valley, and so we're not going to be doing much with that. But let's go on from there to, yeah. Okay, chapter 7 takes us up to the sin of Achan. He stole some of the stuff that was supposed to be devoted to the Lord, kept it for himself. Probably some clothing, some other things. Maybe he found some gold and silver idols of some sort. That was all supposed to have been left for the Lord or burned in the cities. Or Achan took some. When the Battle of Ai was joined, when they decided we're going to go up and take Ai, Ai is about 5 miles up the road, getting close to the watershed. So in Jericho, here we are in Jericho, I'm on the corner of the Tell, looking up at what is called the Mount of Temptation, which may or may not be the Mount of Temptation, but there's the mountain. It's the highest point in the area. So if Jesus was tempted out here in the wilderness near Jericho, that would be the mountain that the devil would take him to. For that reason, you see all those caves up on that mountain? All of those at one time or another were occupied by monks, because this is the Mount of Temptation. Okay. I respect that, The Palestinian Authority has decided to turn Jericho and the Mount of Temptation into a tourist attraction. And so many years ago, the European Union and some other groups dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars to build hotels and a tramway in Jericho. So a big, magnificent hotel structure was started near the Tell. The first floor was eventually finished. And it's been given over to little souk-like shops. And so a whole bunch of people in and out, and, with blue tarps and whatnot, selling whatever they sell. And so it's turned into a souk. Up above that, nothing has ever been done. For some reason or another, the money just disappeared. We don't understand why the money all disappeared. But Rafat's wife continues to live quite large on a billionaire salary in Paris. Now, we don't understand any of that because, of course, here in America, such things never happen. And so we simply don't understand how that could be. But at any rate, they built a tramway, and the tramway, honest to goodness, riblet tram. They didn't go to Switzerland or someplace. They came to Spokane to get the mechanical equipment for a tramway. And it is really nice. And nobody ever goes on it. I've never seen it moving. Yes, sir?
What's up top?
Up at the top?
Yeah. Is that
A monastery.
monastery?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's just a little structure up there. I don't know that anybody occupies that anymore. But that's where the tramway goes. And it's, the view from the top is nothing particular. I mean, it would be interesting. I would have taken the tramway one of these years that I was there, but it was never open. And again, you wonder, did they just run out of money? I can't imagine. The normal efficiency of governments everywhere would prevent that. At any rate, this is the general location. Achan took some of the stuff, and it was time to head up to Ai, and Joshua said, well, let's get this army together. It won't take very many. Send them up, wipe out that little pimple on the way into the hill country, and come back and tell us about your great victory, and we'll go on to even more. Well, they came back in defeat. And Joshua tore his clothes, he prayed, and God explained to him that there's sin in the camp. Somebody in the camp has kept for themselves some of the devoted things, and so they drew lots. And the lot fell on this tribe, and the lot fell on this clan, and the lot fell on this family, and it came out. It was Achan and his wife and their children who had taken this. Joshua confronted him with it. He told him he had to confess, and he did. And so Joshua said that this is the way it's got to be. You and your whole family are going to be put to death. And they found the stuff, and they retrieved that for the treasury. Achan and his family were taken outside the camp and stoned in a place like this. And after the stoning, after they were all dead, the stones were piled up in a heap. And again, we get the admonition. This heap of stones is here so that when your children ask, you can tell them the story. Okay, you remember that? Why are these 12 stones in a circle? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's because of this great victory. God also memorializes the great defeats as a reminder. Don't forget this. Don't forget that when the people sin, the whole people suffer. The bad things happen to a society that permits the growth of sin in its midst. Good thing. Anyway, that's chapter 7. Ai and Bethel. This is possibly the location of Ai. The locations of Ai and Bethel I mentioned a little earlier. It's really debated today. If you go to the scholarly conferences like I used to all the time. Back when I was younger and the school would pay for me to travel. It was fun to go to the conferences and listen to learned men argue with each other about stuff. And one of the things that we argue about is the location of Ai and Bethel. What we do know is that Ai and Bethel are close together. They have to be about 12 Roman miles north of the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. We know that from some other places. They have to be on the watershed route. You know, and Ai has to be on the eastern side. Bethel needs to be on the watershed. So Baitin doesn't work for Bethel, and Et-Tel doesn't work for Ai. They're just in the wrong places. They just don't work. When you get to Ai should not be a very big place. It should be an outpost of Bethel, most likely on a promontory. The area is cut by dry riverbeds that we call wadis. And where two of the wadis come together would be a good place to look for Ai, which is why this particular spot works. This is Khirbet Nisya. And it's probably not the right spot, but it fits in some other ways. And so it's a good illustration. What makes this an interesting spot, way out here, let's see if I can use this, it's easier. This area right out here is the area where we find ruins. So you can see a bit of a wall over there, and there's some other stuff here. Ai should not ever have been rebuilt after the time of Joshua. According to the Bible, there was nothing there. So on one side, we've got a really steep wadi, very rocky, very wide, very narrow, deep, narrow, rocky wadi on this side. On the other side is a relatively wide valley area. Okay? And the Bible says when Joshua goes back up to Ai that he put together a tactical plan how to take this city. Now, it was a walled city. It was fortified with adequate soldiers to protect the place. If the place was walled, it would have been difficult for 30 elephs of Israelites to take the city. If it was defended, they would have trouble. And Joshua wasn't expecting trouble, but it would have been. On the second attack, Joshua did two things. One, he took the main group of the army, main group of the people, up into that wide valley and up onto the side of the hill where they would be very visible. And they deployed, and they rattled their swords, and they shook their spears, and they did everything they could to get people's attention. The night before, a smaller group, the Golani Brigade type of soldiers, came up the narrow defile. They hid in the rocks. Fairly small group, we're not told how small. And as the Israelites came up the other way, Joshua held up his staff and said, "Attack!" And so the whole army came marching around, and the slingers are throwing slings, and the archers are shooting arrows, and everybody's hollering. And the men of Ai shoot arrows back. And as the men of Israel close for the final battle, on a signal from Joshua, they turn and begin to run away. The men of Ai, believing that they had beat off this foe, come down out of their fortress and begin to chase the men of Israel. As that is happening, the Golani Brigade, the paratroopers in the wadi, come up from behind their rocks, sneak into the city, and set fire to the place. So that the men of Ai, looking back, see their city on fire And then looking forward at a signal from Joshua, the men of Israel turn. They turn their tactical withdrawal into a counterattack. Those of you who've got some military experience maybe know how difficult it is to actually do that. Once you've got a body of soldiers moving quickly away from the enemy, there is a psychological barrier to stopping that retreat and turning it into a stand or a counterattack. It's a very difficult maneuver to do. Joshua gave the order, and the men of Israel turned and began to attack the men of Ai. Very, very nice move. As that happened, the elite soldiers came running out of the city and attacked the men of Ai from both sides, so that they were utterly destroyed. Okay, that's a classic bit of infantry tactics that is still taught in the sandboxes of places like Sandhurst and West Point. And it's taught, of course, because it's a classic infantry move. If you're going to be a freshly minted first lieutenant, you've got to know how to do this. Some years ago, I read a story by Leon Uris, and I've forgotten the title of the book, but he wrote a lot of stuff. And one of his stories was of his experience in the South Pacific during World War II, in the jungles of Guadalcanal. And the Japanese had set up a nicely fortified machine gun nest in the jungle. And their platoon had run into it and taken casualties. And so they backed off, and they sent a small group flanking. They made another attack, came up, and Uris says, just like Joshua at the Battle of Ai, we made a lot of noise, and then we began to run away. The Japanese came up out of their nicely laid defensive position and were slaughtered by the flankers. Again, that's infantry tactics 101. The kids who go off to defend our country learn that when they're just getting started. But Joshua, as far as I know, is the first one to actually describe this move. And there's a lot of things in Joshua that are like that. They're just perfect. So that was the destruction of Ai. The city was completely destroyed along with all of its people, and the group got together and headed up toward Bethel. Bethel was also quickly taken. Its army was defeated. The city itself was not destroyed. We should not be looking for a burn layer at Bethel, if we ever find it. The gate of the city, a little note about the gates. So the gate of Ai, then again the gate of Bethel. The gate of a city is usually the most heavily defended point. If the city has a wall, it will have at least one gate, usually two. If it's got intersecting streets like a New Testament city, there'll be four. Modern Jerusalem, the old city in modern Jerusalem has, 7 gates? Got gates all over the place. But I wouldn't have had much of anything, probably one gate. Bethel would have had 2 gates. The gate would include towers on both sides with places for archers, so that not only can the archers look out at what's coming, they can look along the wall and shoot at anybody who's attacking. So there would be towers in various places, but at the gate there'd be a tower on either side. The gate itself would be completely enclosed. It would go up and over the top and down, not like a cavalry fort. Fort Apache doesn't have anything like this, but a big sturdy gate, and it would have been filled up with rubble on the inside. Prior to that, the gates often had 4 or 6 chambers on either side of the roadway heading in. Often, a gate would involve, there'd be a road coming up the side next to the wall in one direction or another. In the classic formation after, during the Iron Age, the normal roadway leading up to the front gate of a city would have the soldiers' right side facing the wall. And you're coming up and you're facing the wall, and your sword, you're going to carry on your left side, of course, so that you can draw Texas cross draw, and you then bring out your sword to fight whoever you're fighting. And that leaves your sword on that side. Your shield is carried on the left. So an army approaching the city will be in some trouble. They'll have to get that shield off and do that, and then they've got to ride the horse with the left hand, and it makes it difficult. Not terribly difficult, but any advantage is an advantage. The gate itself sometimes is straight. The older gates up to the late Bronze Age are typically straight through, with either 2 chambers on each side or 3. By the Iron Age, it would come in through a chamber or 2, take a left, and then take a right. So you're going through this zigzag. You can't be in your chariot and go galloping through the gate. Now, if the gate was straight through, they would add something else that's really very interesting called a stumbling block. You and I are told not to be a stumbling block to our brothers, okay? A stumbling block is a stone that sits straight up right in the middle of the road. So that if you're in a chariot or a cart, the wheels will go right around it, and it won't be a big problem. But the horses that you're driving will notice that there's a stone there, and they'll slow down. It's like a speed bump. The horses will slow down, and it gives the defenders time to shoot you. That's what it's for. That's a stumbling block. And we find those in all kinds of places with walls. One of my favorite spots to go is Pompeii in Italy. I've taken, I don't know how many groups through Pompeii. And at the gates of Pompeii, you can see the stumbling block right in the middle, and on either side there's a cornerstone, okay? And the cornerstone defines the location and the right angles and all of that. So a cornerstone, and then at the top of the arch, there is a keystone. All the weight bears on the keystone to go onto the side posts. In the New Testament, Jesus describes himself as the cornerstone, the keystone, and the stumbling block. So if you're looking for a rock to lean on, you pick the one who's the head of the corner and the stumbling block, because that's the best one. Anyway, that'll last. Yeah, I've got time. Okay, and they chased them. When the men first stopped, they chased them as far as the stone quarries. Stone quarries can be everywhere. Frankly, if you're looking for stones in Israel, you've come to the right place. It's hard to find a place without them. And a typical wall looks something like this. This is called a Cyclops wall. Classical archaeologists, the French first named it that, so don't blame me. That the Cyclops wall has big stones surrounded by little stones, and that's a very easy wall to build in Israel, because there are lots and lots of big rocks, and little rocks, and medium-sized rocks. And you can always find rocks to build with. And it's not a very sturdy wall, because as you can imagine, if you have the right tools, you can wiggle and shake and start making trouble in a corner, and the wall will collapse. Okay? That's why cut stone and makes a better wall. Mud bricks are not as strong as this. Jericho was probably made of mud bricks. And so they have the glissy, anyway, all of that. Stone quarries, that's all you need to know about that. Achan and his sin, he had a Babylonian robe. What was a Babylonian robe like? Here we've got some. What would they be made of? Normally linen, made from flax. This was the stuff that Rahab was making. So we have a little bit of that around. And it is called the Valley of Achor to this day. Scholars disagree about the meaning of the word Achor, probably something like shame, but it's difficult to do, but that's the spot where Achan was buried. Destruction of Ai, and we've talked about that. The ambush location on the steep side, not the wide side. Okay, Ai and Bethel have to be close together. This is the Arab city of Baitin. It's about 10 miles north of Bethlehem, should be 12. These kids are adorable, but that was when I shot them 30 years ago. Today they're probably throwing Molotov cocktails at tanks. Frankly, it's the children that I really, really, really pity. They're being raised in a destructive ideology, and it's eventually going to destroy them. I feel really badly about the kids. So when I'm there, I spend what time I possibly can with kids, trying to let them know that Americans are friendly. If you can get at least that far, it's something. All right, the javelin. Joshua used his javelin as the control flag. Is this the way it was actually done? Yes, actually it was. The javelin was a handy thing. The javelin is like this. It's about 6 feet long. It's got a sharp point on one end and a weight on the other end, and it's designed for tossing. It's not a spear. A spear is designed for poking at short distances. You stand behind the shield wall, and the guys with spears reach out and poke whoever they can poke. And if you're the bad guy getting the pokes, you want to stay out of range. And that's how a spear is effective. The javelin is for throwing. This particular image has it wrong. And javelin always has a pair of barbs, because once you've thrown it, you don't have it anymore. And once you've thrown it, you hope that it hits something soft that will, where it will stick and be troublesome to remove. Okay? You're trying to cause difficulty for your target. And so it's got barbs on it to make it more difficult to get out. If it takes a few minutes, then you've bought yourself a few minutes. If it kills him, that's a bonus. But if it puts him out of the game for a few minutes, then that's a win. That's what javelins did. Now, Joshua would have used a javelin as a signal. There's all kinds of ways you can signal with a javelin. You point it straight up and do this. You can do this kind of thing. You can do, there's all kinds of things you can do with a javelin to give different kinds of orders. This was necessary because Joshua had probably, very likely, more than 600 men in the field. The British established back during the days when the British ruled the world, they established that a British regiment needed to have no more than 600 men, because they discovered that you can only control with your voice and associated speaking tubes or whatever, 600 men at one time. Beyond that, you need to send messengers to the captains of regiments. Okay, so that's why that number comes up. It's virtually certain that Joshua had more than that. So he had a signal. That's what the javelin is for. Okay, and I was burned, one of only three. Plunder as a motivator. In I, the plunder was taken. And this is the kind of stuff that would have been taken. The soldiers got to keep it. Some of it was put in the Lord's treasury, the rest was the loot. Okay, and so I was going to be a permanent heap of ruins after this time. And archaeologically, all of the places that we've looked at, except Et Tel, which is funny because the term means the ruin. Et Tel was in fact rebuilt during New Testament times. And we know there were settlements there from time to time. The other spots that we're looking at, Kirbet Nisya and the other one that everybody likes better, have in fact been ruins since the late Bronze Age. Anyway, here we have it. All right. Chapter 8. Do I have time to get you into this? Yes, I'm going to. Do I have time? Well, no, but we'll take the time. After the Battle of Ai, Joshua took his people, in chapter 8, up to the north to Shechem. Now, if you remember your Genesis, you remember that Jacob came back from Mesopotamia with his family and his herds and all the rest of it, and eventually crossed over, and he had his meeting with Esau and then crossed on over, and he camped near Shechem. And there was a bit of an interaction between the men of Israel and the men of Shechem, and we end up with the assault on Dinah, not a good thing. The boy who was the criminal in this then begged his father to go talk to the father of the girl and get her as his wife because he really likes her and all of this. It ends up the men of Shechem agreed to circumcision, and while they were in pain, the men of Judah's sons came in, led by Levi, came in and killed them all. Now, it couldn't have been a huge group, but they killed them all. And afterwards, they took the women of Shechem, and a community continued to exist there. They were half Shechemites, half Israelites. When Joshua came back to the Promised Land, it's clear that he considered the people of Shechem to be brothers rather than others. The Canaanites and Perizzites and the otherites were all enemies, but the men of Shechem were not. Interestingly, in the Amarna letters, the king of Jericho, a character by the name of Labayu, complained to the king of Egypt that Shechem has gone off with the Habiru, and that the king of Egypt needs to come up and punish the king of Shechem, for he has become Habiru. Okay, what exactly happened? It's obvious from the Bible that Shechem was not conquered. The king of Shechem is not listed amongst the kings of Canaan who were conquered. Okay? Instead, Joshua came up to Shechem and celebrated the covenant. In Deuteronomy, God told Moses, and through Moses the people, that when they came back into the land, they were to go to Shechem and reconfirm the covenant. And this covenant is the Ten Commandments and the associated laws that are built on the Ten Commandments. Deuteronomy is meant as a preparation for that. And this generation, or going into Israel, has just received the Deuteronomic covenant material. So this is fresh in their minds. Joshua, we're told, built an altar on Mount Ebal. It would have been built of uncut stones, because that's the Israelite way. And it would have been a place where sacrifices could have been made. About 25, 30 years ago, oh no, let's see if I can find it. No, I can't find the name, but it doesn't matter. One of the archaeologists who works over there did some work at Mount Ebal, because there's a structure up on the side of that hill that everybody's known about forever. But we finally got the thing excavated, and it turns out that it's got a shape something like this. Uncut stones, large flat area, evidence the sacrifices have been made, bones and whatnot in the surrounding area. So this was obviously an altar. It dates back, this one dates back to the early part of the Iron Age. So I don't believe that what we found on Mount Ebal is Joshua's altar, but I just think it's very likely that it's built on the site of Joshua's altar. Just different stones, different pottery, and so far it hasn't gone below this level. I don't think it's a good idea to go below that level. But we found it there, and so if you're wondering, is that Joshua's altar? Well, it's the right place. It's exactly the right place, and it looks like what it should be there for. Probably a memorial that's built later. Interesting that Shechem alone is the place that is set aside, both in the Bible and in the Amarna letters. I like that. And Shechem was not destroyed. Okay, the altar of uncut stones. This is another view of the altar on Mount Ebal. The height of that central platform from the ground level right next to it is probably about 8 feet, so it's well above my head height. If you go up there, you'll find it's big. And it was meant to be visible from all over the place. Yeah, there it was. And this scarab that is here on the right dates to the time between Joshua's time and the Iron Age. So sometime around 1250 or 1300 BC. It's an Egyptian scarab. What does that mean? Well, it's generally the right time frame. That's what we mean. Okay. What else have I got? We're not going to do the Gibeonites today. We'll come back and do some Gibeonites next time. Gibeon is interesting. The right half of that tell is modern Gibeon, El Jib, and the left side of that tell is ancient Gibeon. They're still living in the same place. It's interesting. But we'll come back and do that next week. Next week will be our last week of 5,000 slides from a moving tour bus, and we'll go on from there. Okay. Bye bye, everybody. Thanks for coming. Love y'all.